The old rancher almost walked past the barn that night, not if he had taken 10 more steps toward the house. He never would have heard the quiet sound buried beneath the wind. A cough, weak, barely. Human. He stopped. The Wyoming prairie had been swallowing travelers for days. A late spring storm had turned the trails into rivers of mud. And even the toughest cowboys were staying close to town. Nobody should have been out there. Silas. Morgan lifted his lantern and pushed open the heavy barn door. Horse? He called. Only silence answered. Then another cough. His eyes searched through stacks of hay until the light landed on a pair of frightened blue eyes staring back at him. A young woman. She was wrapped in a soaked gray blanket, trembling so hard she could barely sit upright. Silas frowned. You planning on freezing to death in my barn? She tried to stand. I'll leave. She collapsed before taking 2 steps. Silas caught her before she struck the dirt floor. She weighed almost nothing. He noticed bruises along her wrists. Fresh ones. His jaw tightened. You running from somebody? She looked away. I can't answer that. That was answer enough. He helped her sit on a hay bale and handed her his canteen. She drank like someone who hadn't seen water in days. My name's Silas. She hesitated. Emma. He wasn't sure that was her real name, but he didn't ask again. You hungry? She nodded without speaking. He returned 20 minutes later carrying stew, fresh bread, and a dry wool blanket. She stared at the food with watery eyes. No. One's fed me without asking for something in return. Silas shrugged. Guess. Tonight's your lucky night. She smiled. It lasted only a second, but it changed something. Inside the old barn. Silas noticed she kept glancing toward the door, expecting someone. Listening. Afraid. Double quotes. You got family? No? Husband? Her face hardened. No. Silas respected silence. Out on the frontier, everyone carried ghosts. He spread fresh hay across the corner. You can stay here tonight. I don't have money. I didn't ask. What if someone comes looking? Silas looked at the Winchester hanging beside the door. They'll have to explain themselves first. For the first time since he'd found her, Emma looked safe. She ate slowly. Every few bites she stopped, as though waiting for someone to snatch the bowl away. Silas pretended not to notice. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Rain hammered the roof. After finishing the stew, Emma whispered something so softly he almost missed it. Thank you for treating me like a person. Silas simply nodded. He headed toward the house before turning back. If you hear coyotes, don't worry. She forced a nervous smile. I'm not afraid of coyotes. What are you afraid of? She stared into the darkness beyond the barn door. The men who taught me not to fear anything else. Silas didn't sleep much that night. Something about her words stayed with him. Just before dawn, he heard horses. Not one, several. He grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. 4 riders emerged through the morning fog. Well-dressed. Armed. There. Leader wore an expensive black coat. We're looking for a runaway, the man said. Silas remained calm. Don't know what you're talking about. The stranger smiled without warmth. Young woman. Blonde hair. Silas didn't blink. Never saw her. The man's eyes drifted toward the barn. We'd like to look inside. Silas rested one hand on his rifle. I didn't invite company. 4. Several long seconds nobody moved. Then the stranger reached into his pocket. Instead of drawing a weapon, he unfolded a photograph. Silas felt the blood drain. From his face, it wasn't a wanted poster. It was a wedding portrait. Emma stood beside the man in the black coat wearing a white dress. The stranger smiled. My wife has been missing. Silas slowly looked toward the barn. And for the first time, he wondered if he had sheltered the wrong person. The photograph lingered in Silas's mind long after the riders disappeared down the trail. The man had introduced himself as Caleb Ashford, a wealthy cattle baron from the next county. His voice had been polished, calm, almost convincing. My wife is confused, Caleb had said. She's been unwell since losing our child. If she's here, please send her home. Silas had answered with silence until the men finally rode away. Only when the sound of hoofbeats faded did he hurry to the barn. Emma was gone. His heart dropped. Then he heard movement above him. She had climbed into the hayloft and hidden beneath loose straw. When she saw it was Silas, she climbed down with shaking hands. They found me? They almost did. She looked toward the open door. I have too. Leave. You'll die out there. I'd rather die than go back. Silas reached into his pocket and unfolded the wedding photograph Caleb had left behind. You care to explain this? Emma stared at it. Her face lost all color. Then tears filled her eyes. He still carries that picture. You are his wife. She nodded. Once, but not by choice. Silas waited. She took a slow breath. My father owed Caleb more money than he could ever repay. Silas already knew where the story was going, so he traded you. Emma lowered her head. I was 18? The words came slowly, painfully, as if every sentence reopened an old wound. Caleb had promised her family comfort, land, and protection. Instead, he had locked her inside a mansion where every smile hid another cage. She was dressed beautifully, fed well, never allowed to leave. Whenever she questioned him, he reminded her she belonged to him. The bruises on her wrists hadn't come from a fall. They came from iron locks. I escaped 6 days ago, she whispered. How? A maid left a window unlocked. Silas looked away before his anger could show. No wonder she had been terrified. Why didn't you tell me? Because no one ever believes a wife who runs. Silas couldn't argue with that. By afternoon, word spread through the nearest town. A reward, $500, for the safe return of Caleb Ashford's missing wife. $500 could buy an entire ranch. Neighbors began stopping by. Cowboys, hunters, men. Silas had known for years. You hear about that reward? Someone's gonna get rich. Silas simply nodded. Inside the barn, Emma heard every word. That evening, she packed the blanket. I won't ruin your life. You ain't ruining anything. They'll accuse you of kidnapping. They can accuse all they want. You could lose your ranch. Silas smiled faintly. I've lost bigger things. She studied him. What? My wife. It was the first time he had spoken about Sarah in nearly 8 years. Fever took her. Emma didn't know what to say. I buried her myself. Silence settled between them. Two broken hearts sitting in an old barn. Neither looking for love. Only peace. As darkness covered the valley, Silas brought her another bowl of stew. She laughed quietly. What? You always bring stew. I know one thing how to cook. She smiled. Again. This one lasted longer, for a few minutes. They forgot Caleb existed. They forgot the reward, forgot the storm, forgot every scar. Until a gunshot shattered the Silence. The barn wall exploded beside them. Wood splintered. Across the floor, a voice echoed outside. We. No, she's in there. Another shot. Silas grabbed Emma's hand. Don't let go. Together, they ran into the darkness behind the barn, while flames suddenly climbed the dry wooden walls behind them. The fire spread faster than either of them could run. Dry timber cracked behind them, sending showers of sparks into the night. Smoke rolled across the pasture, while frightened horses screamed. Inside their pens, Silas stopped. Horses. Emma grabbed his arm. You'll die. They've carried me through half my life. Without another word, he wrapped a wet blanket around his shoulders and disappeared into the burning barn. Emma stood frozen. She had spent years watching men save property before people. Silas had chosen both, one by one. Terrified horses burst through the smoke as Silas cut their reins and drove them into the open field. The roof groaned. A burning beam crashed only inches behind him. Silas. He stumbled out coughing. His shirt burned through one shoulder. Emma caught him before he fell. You. Fool. He smiled through the pain. Guess I still know how to make an entrance. There wasn't time to laugh. Riders emerged through the darkness. Caleb's men. They had circled the ranch. Silas pulled Emma behind a stone fence as bullets tore through the air. We're trapped. No, Silas said quietly. They think we are. He knew every hill, every creek, every hidden trail on his land. Keeping low, they slipped through a narrow ravine hidden by tall sagebrush. Riders chased shadows while Silas led Emma toward insured. Abandoned trapping cabin deep in the mountains. By dawn, they reached. It was little more than 4 walls and a roof, but it was safe. Emma cleaned the burn on Silas's shoulder with trembling hands. This will hurt. I've had worse. She smiled. You always say things like that. It usually makes people stop worrying. It doesn't. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. Emma carefully wrapped fresh cloth around his shoulder. You risked everything for. Silas looked out the small window. I couldn't stand by. Why? He was quiet for a long time. Because someone should have stood by my wife. Emma frowned. Silas finally told her the truth. Years ago, Sarah had become ill while he was away driving cattle north. Neighbors assumed she would recover. No one stayed. No one helped. By the time Silas returned, she had died alone. I promised myself, he whispered, if I ever had another chance to help someone, I wouldn't arrive too late. Emma reached across the table and gently took his hand. You kept your promise. For the first time in years, Silas felt the weight on his heart begin to lift. Outside, snow began falling over the mountains. Inside that tiny cabin, 2 lonely souls shared coffee, quiet laughter, and stories neither had ever dared tell another person. For 3 peaceful days, the world forgot them. On the 4th morning, hoofbeats echoed outside. Silas looked through the window. His face hardened. Caleb himself had found them. And this time, he hadn't come with deputies. He had come with 10 armed men. Caleb stepped down from his horse as though he already owned the mountain. His expensive black coat was dusted with snow, but his smile was as cold as ever. There you are, he called. You've caused quite enough trouble. Emma stood beside Silas in the doorway. I'm not going back. Caleb laughed. Softly. You don't get to decide. That. Silas rested his hand near his rifle. You've got no claim here. I have a marriage certificate. You've got paper, Silas answered. She says no. For the first time, Caleb's pleasant mask slipped. You think this old rancher can protect you? Emma stepped forward before Silas could answer. I don't need protection anymore. Caleb's eyes narrowed. I fed you, dressed you, gave your family everything. You bought my father, Emma said, her voice shaking with anger. You never owned me. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of a revolver being cocked. One of Caleb's. Men raised his weapon. Another. Did the same. Silas slowly drew his own. For one terrifying heartbeat. Everyone waited. Then a familiar voice echoed from the trees. Drop your guns. Half a dozen riders emerged from the forest. Not Caleb's men, Silas's. Neighbors. The same men who had spoken about the reward. Old Ben, Tom Alvarez, Jacob Reed. Each carried a rifle. Caleb frowned. I offered all of you $500. Old Ben spat into the snow. We met your housekeeper yesterday. Emma looked up. The maid? Ben nodded. Double quotes. She told us what you've done to that girl. Tom added quietly. We came for the reward. He smiled. Turns out keeping our honor was worth more. Caleb looked around and realized his advantage had disappeared. His men began lowering their weapons. Only Caleb refused. He suddenly grabbed Emma by the arm and pressed a revolver against her side. If I can't have her, no one will. Everything happened at once. Emma drove her elbow into Caleb's ribs. The gun fired harmlessly into the snow. Silas lunged. The two men crashed to the ground. Years of loneliness, grief, and quiet restraint exploded into one desperate fight. Caleb was younger, stronger, but Silas fought like a man defending the last good thing life had given him. One final punch sent Caleb backward over the icy bank. His revolver slid into the creek below. He looked up to see 6 rifles aimed directly at him. It was over. The sheriff arrived before sunset. After hearing Emma's testimony, along with the maids and several servants. Caleb Ashford was arrested. As they led him away in handcuffs. He stared at Emma with pure hatred. You'll regret this. Emma looked him straight in the eyes. No. Her voice never shook. I already survived you. As the wagons disappeared into the distance, the mountain finally became quiet again. Silas turned toward Emma. Neither spoke. Neither knew what came next, because saving someone was far easier than learning how to build a life together. Spring arrived gently across the Wyoming Valley. The black scars where the barn had burned slowly disappeared beneath fresh green grass. Neighbors came without being asked. They raised new walls. Set new beams, hammered new shingles into place. Every man who had once chased the reward now worked beside Silas for nothing. Emma worked harder than anyone. She planted flowers beside the porch where only weeds had grown before. She laughed with the ranch hands. She learned the names of every horse. The frightened woman Silas had found beneath a pile of hay slowly faded into memory. One evening, after months of rebuilding, Silas found her standing inside the new barn. Sunlight poured through the fresh wooden walls. It smells better than the old one, she said. It leaks less too. She laughed. I suppose that's progress. Silas looked around. It all started here. She nodded. One cold night, when I almost walked past. Emma's smile softened. But you didn't. Silence settled comfortably between them. Not the silence of strangers. The silence of two hearts that no longer feared being understood. I've been thinking, Silas said. That sounds dangerous. It usually is. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I don't have fancy speeches. You never did. I can't promise you'll never cry again. She shook her head. I know. I can't promise life will be easy. I know that too, but I can promise this. His voice trembled. You'll never wonder again if you're alone. He opened the box. Inside rested Sarah's simple gold wedding ring. I've carried this for years because I couldn't imagine anyone else wearing it. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I think Sarah would be angry if I spent the rest of my life hiding from happiness. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, Emma whispered, She must have loved you very much. I hope so. I think she'd be proud that you kept your promise. Silas looked confused. A promise to never arrive too late. Emma slipped the ring onto her finger. It fits. So, she smiled through tears. Yes. He wrapped his arms around her as the evening breeze drifted through the open barn doors. Months later, the little church near the valley filled with neighbors who had watched two broken lives become one. There were no expensive decorations. No grand celebration. Only honest smiles, weathered hands, and hearts that believed in second chances. Old Ben leaned toward Tom during the ceremony and whispered, Funny, isn't it? What is? That the best thing Silas ever found wasn't in his fields. Tom grinned. It was sleeping in his barn. Everyone laughed, including Emma. Years passed. Travelers often stopped at the Morgan Ranch asking for water, food, or a place to rest. No one was turned away. Whenever someone apologized for arriving, unexpectedly, Emma would simply smile and say the words that had changed her own life forever. Sometimes strangers bring the future with them. And every evening, as the sun disappeared behind the endless western hills, Silas would look toward the rebuilt barn. Not because he remembered the fire, not because he remembered the fear, but because that ordinary wooden building had become the place where two lonely souls discovered that the greatest miracles rarely arrive with fanfare. Sometimes they arrive, exhausted. Cold. Afraid. And hoping that one kind person will leave the door open for just one night, only to wake the next morning and find that everything has changed.